I was given the remit this afternoon to talk a little bit about how to create great teams and how to improve performance. And it's a challenge that my team and I get asked to help with a lot. And it's one we've helped businesses with a lot over the last 12 years as business coaches. And when I looked at all the tools and the strategies that we've used to coach people on this challenge, and I thought, wow, I could spend the next 10 to 20 hours up here going through all of the different strategies that we use. And in fact, that's what we do with the clients we work with. And unfortunately, I've only got 20 minutes. So I thought, right, and I'm sure you'd love to hear me up here for the next 10 to 20 hours, but lunch is not too far away. So I've got 20 minutes. So I thought, right, how can I really distill this down into what's going to be most useful and valuable for you today over the next 20 minutes. And so I've gone back to some fundamental principles. And just before I do that, I thought it would be good just hearing what some of the previous discussions were saying. Can I just gauge in the room, can I just quickly just check, very quick show of hands, how many of you are actually have a team directly working for you in some way, shape or form? Can I just want to gauge? Okay, so it is the majority of the room. Fantastic, because these first principles apply to whether you're fairly new and maybe don't have any kind of team yet, or whether you're an established business that's got 10, 20, 30, 40 people and just looking to improve the performance of the people you have. And that's certainly a very, very common sentiment I hear from businesses. They've got the teams, but it's not the most fun or productive experience for the people running them. So, first of all, I want to talk about the vision for the company, and this very much touches on something that Jenny mentioned as well in her talk. Vision and values. Do you know, or have you defined the vision for your business? And what is a company vision? It's not a goal. So I'm not talking about goals here. I'm talking about a vision, a purpose, a direction for your practice that serves to enroll and engage people and even inspire them. I'll give you an example. John F. Kennedy in the 60s told the Americans that he wanted to be the first country to put man on the moon. And that vision, essentially for a country, served to inspire the entire population. And that's what a great vision can do. It can inspire and engage people. And of course, it has to first start by inspiring and engaging yourselves. And of course, then inspire and engage the people that are working for you and with you. So my first question to you all is really, have you defined that in your own business? Do you know what it is? Have you written it down? If I was to walk into your business, and where would I see it? And if I was to ask the people that are working with you or for you what the vision is, if I was to ask them to actually write it down, would they all come up with the same words? Or would there be misunderstanding and confusion about what the company vision is? So having that clarity of long-term vision is really important if you want to really engage and inspire the people to better performance in your companies. And underlying that is the values that are in your business, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But unfortunately, the reality for most businesses in this country is that the workforces are not performing at an optimal level, and in fact, far from it. And this is a slide. This is a result of a survey that Gallup and a number of other agencies do on levels of workplace engagement. And they actually have tools to measure workplace engagement in the UK, and in fact they do this globally as well. And the stats that have been recorded for UK workplace engagement are remarkably consistent and also remarkably worrying, I think, if you run a business. And they talk about three types of employees: the engaged, the not engaged, and the disengaged. And the engaged are basically people who work from the heart. They're like you and I. They care about the business, they care about where it's going, and they've put their heart and soul into it. And these people, they're pretty obvious. You'll know who they are in your businesses, assuming you've got them. It's the second category, really, that's always of interesting. It's what I call the fat middle. The non-engaged employees, these are people who who are there, they turn up, they do the work, but they're not emotionally connected with the business. And so for them, their number one motivator, their number one reason for being in the workplace is not the vision or the purpose of the business. It's a paycheck. And so they'll do what's necessary to get paid. And the incredible statistic about that is that usually around 2/3 of the UK workforce fit that category. 2/3. And what I find with a lot of people running their own business is they don't actually realise they've got these people in their business. I'll give a few hints as to what they look like in a moment. And they're not doing it deliberately, it's just who they are. And the third category there, the actively disengaged. These are the people, these are saboteurs of the business. They're doing as little as possible and doing everything for their own self-interest rather than the business. They should be pretty easy to spot, and that's usually about 20% of the workplace. And I don't know if those stats surprise anyone, because the top one in 2016, that the engaged employees was around 13% of the workforce. I think last year that came out around 8% of the workforce. And those stats are echoed around the world. And some people, when I coach them through this, they're surprised. Others certainly aren't at those stats. And I call those people in the middle, I call them the Homer Simpsons. I don't know if we've got any Simpsons fans here, but I call them the Homer Simpsons because what does Homer Simpson do at work? Well, he shows up, and he might even show up on time. And when the boss walks in, what happens? See, when the boss walks in, he looks busy. He's pushing buttons, he's running around. He's telling the boss how much he's doing. And when the boss isn't there, what behaviours does he revert back to? And pretty much not a lot. So this is, and I see this over and over again when I've coached business owners through this over the years, and when I've spent time on them spotting the Homer Simpsons and what to do about it, they've realised they're more common than they realised. And if you want increased performance, we've got to better engage the people that work for you. And vision is one way of doing that. And we also need to define a clear company culture for your business. And if you've done this, this is great. And this is really underpinned by the values. What are the values of your organisation? And I don't just mean these buzzwords that are just bandied around that don't really mean anything to anyone. The values have to be personal to you. It's no good saying, well, one of our values is honesty, if you're not an honest person. So you've got to be honest about them. What are the values that are important to you? Does your team actually understand what your company values are? Do they get talked about? Do they get lived? Do they get measured? And there's a lot of case studies now, some of the most successful businesses on the planet who've driven their success through strong and engaging company cultures rather than just the product or the service that they offer. And so being able to define this, it clearly is really important. And one of the biggest mistakes I see made is that you bring on someone into the team and you don't tell them what your vision or your values are. And the team members then find this out later down the line. And of course, if there's a misalignment between the two, if that team member doesn't share the same values as you, they're not going to engage with what you're doing. In fact, quite the opposite. They're going to drag their feet. And it's partly, it's your responsibility to educate people on that before they make the decision as to whether they should be working for you or not. But on the flip side, if you do this and you get clear on it, you're more likely to be able to attract people into your organisation who align. And not everyone's going to align, of course, but the more you can attract people who do, the more likely they are to actually want to work for you. Because they believe in the vision, they believe in the purpose, and they believe in the values. So being able to do this, irrespective of what stage you are in business, is very important indeed. And I'm just going to touch on some of the values that I think are important that will really help you get better results from your teams and the people that work with you. And the first one, this is a quote from Herb Kelleher. Some of you may have heard of Herb Kelleher. He was the founder of Southwest Airlines in America. He was ranked one of the top 5 CEOs of the last century. And he was asked about how he built a successful airline. And as you'll know, most airlines are not successful. They do not make money. They are badly run and badly led. And what he said was, well, we hire an attitude. We're looking for people with the right attitude, the right values, the right mentality. We don't just look for people who've got great skills and great CVs. And in fact, that's not the number one criteria for recruitment. And when you can contrast that with the way that most businesses hire, of course, especially most small businesses, the first step in recruitment is to look at CVs. And what does a CV tell you about someone's attitude? What does it tell you about someone's values? Well, nothing. What does it tell you about their skills? A lot of the time, that's questionable as well. So a lot of businesses get this completely the wrong way around. And when I'm coaching people on this, I'm looking at putting in filters so that people actually have to demonstrate their attitude rather than just their skills before they can work for you. Again, a really critical thing to be able to look for, and it's of course it's not an easy thing. And when I have clients who do this, and they're always astonished by how few of their candidates who apply to their business ever fulfill these criteria for attitude, because most people are those Homer Simpsons, and when they're applying for a job, they just press a button and fire a CV away if you let them. So there's no filter for attitude. So we've got to look for attitude, we've got to align with values. And another key thing, if you want to get the best out of people in your teams, another word that gets talked about a lot is trust, of course. You've got to trust people, and yes, you do. Otherwise, why did you hire them? If you hire them and you don't trust them to do a good job, well, and yes, of course, you have to train them, as Jenny was saying. You've got to train them, but you've got to trust them. And what I see in a lot of companies is what I call the superhero syndrome. So you have the people working your teams, and then something goes wrong. A project gets delayed, mistakes get made, and who's the superhero who has to come in and fix it? And in most businesses, I'm looking at them. The superhero is usually the person at top. Well, I'm the one who has to fix it, Parag, because I'm the one who has the knowledge. I'm the expert. My team need help, so I will go and fix it. And in you go, and fix the problem, and everyone's happy. Now, why is that why is that a detrimental behavior in a business, especially if you want to get the best out of your people? Well, think about it from your team's perspectives. How much are they learning by you being the fixer of all their problems? Every time something goes wrong, what are they learning? Well, nothing, because you're the one who's come in to fix it. So their learning, their skills doesn't really progress, especially if you're an organisation, as Jenny said, the average spend £300 per person per annum. Wow. So basically, organisations are spending nothing on training, and the usual response I get is, well, it's on the job. Well, where's the on-the-job training if you're the one who's fixing it? So think of the other thing it creates as well in terms of the attitude and motivation of the people. If every time there's a problem, someone else comes in to fix it, how are you training them to think about how to deal with problems? They're just going to think, great, there's a problem. I'll just call on my buddy to come and fix it. I'll do some upwards delegation. And of course, in swoops the superhero to fix it. So trust is a word that gets talked about a lot, but it's easier said than done. And obviously, if you are going to trust your teams, you need to hire well. You need to engage them with vision and values, and you also need to train well, because that's the only way they're going to grow. And I'll talk a little bit about how to coach and train, specifically how to coach and train people, because I am a coach, and so I can give you a few insights into how to do that. The other thing I want to talk about in terms of culture and performance is again, what happens when things go wrong? Do you have people in your team who, every time a deadline gets missed, they blame a client, or they blame the excuse of time, or worse, they blame someone else in the team? And do you have a company culture where that's okay? That's acceptable? In fact, do you do it? And I see this a lot. In fact, it's all the time in business, and we very much advocate that the most important thing to do is to have a culture where you're not victim. It's not a victim mentality. And that you're not blaming external circumstances or other parties for why things are or are not going well. And instead, we very much advocate that yourselves and the people in your teams are taking ownership and accountability and responsibility for what's really going on, and why didn't that project go to plan? Why were those mistakes made? What can you, i.e. the team, do about it? And effectively coaching your people to think this way is incredibly powerful. And I have lots of clients actually who've even printed this out and put it in their offices. And they've shown this to their teams. And one of my clients, Scott, and he actually runs an estate agency, and he said to me, Parag, I got this guy, and he's always late. He's always late. And he always gives me an excuse. And he's always very apologetic, but he always gives me an excuse. And I said, Scott, will you be taking him through this? And he goes, well, no, I get it, but I'm going to take him through it. And now, that guy was never late again. Because every time he was late, Scott just waved this at him, and the guy just grinned and goes, okay, yeah, I can't give you an excuse. I need to start now looking at taking ownership for why I was late and doing something about it. And guess what? The guy did. He started looking at his own behaviours and thinking, well, why was I late and what can I do about it, rather than passing the buck all the time. So, again, this is very important. It's got nothing to do with skills and CVs, but it's got a lot to do with the mentality and the attitude, and effectively coaching them to think that way. And we call this the victor's mentality, because it forces your team and the people in it to really think about why things have gone well or not gone well. And the other thing I want to share with you today is this matrix. And when I talk about coaching people in your teams to perform at a better level, we call this the skill-will matrix. And this really maps out, if you think about your own teams, this maps out where the people in your teams sit in your organisation. So, for example, along the bottom two boxes are the lower skilled people, and the higher two are the higher skilled people. And they're either low will, so low willingness or attitude, or hopefully higher willingness and attitude. And so if you think about the people in these four boxes, your approach to managing them and getting the best out of them will actually differ depending on who's where in this matrix. So first of all, just quickly, the bottom left box, low skill, low will. If you've got one of those, what should be your approach? What do you do with one of those? Well, very simple, really. They shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be there. The least you can expect as an employer is somebody with at least the right attitude. They may not be the finished article at all. They may be inexperienced skill-wise, but the least you can expect, and in fact demand, is a better attitude, and at least the attitude to want to learn and grow. So hopefully, most of the people who work with you are at least in that bottom right box. Now, I'd say very few would be in those top two boxes. And the reason I say that is I say they're the high skill people, and most small businesses are not recruiting high skill, 20-year plus experience, 50 to 100 grand a year employees. Most of them. Some of you maybe are, or maybe you've got one or two of those. Most will tend to recruit more junior because they think it's cheaper. And that's a discussion for another day, of course, because you get what you pay for. But let's say you have got bottom right. So they've got the right attitude, they just don't have the skills. And you're thinking, well, how can I increase their performance? What do I need to do? And we call that coaching. You need to coach them. You can't just tell them, here's the project, here's the task, here's what you need to do, because they don't have all the skills to do it. And that sounds obvious, but it's a mistake that's made every day in business. So you can't just tell them what to do. You have to coach them. So what does coaching actually mean? Well, I'm a business coach. As I said, I've been doing this for 12 and a half years. I've coached nearly 400 businesses. And the number one thing I do with people is ask them questions. And that's exactly what you should be doing with the people that you're working with. You have to impart knowledge. So I call this mentorship as well. You have to share knowledge. So knowledge can come through training courses, whether they be formal, CPDs. They can come from you directly, you and your team. There has to be books, all those sort of things. Everyone I coach, I believe, should have a learning culture. And most businesses I coach have that. And that doesn't mean just the people at the top. Everyone in the business is involved in learning and self-learning and development. And it's so many resources now in terms of online and YouTube and books and things like that. So your job as a manager and a good leader is to direct them to the resources that are going to help upskill them. But you also have to ask questions, and this is fundamental. And the reason we do that is because of the way the brain works. Because if you're the kind of person that's briefed a member of your team and told them here's what needs to happen on a piece of work, and then a couple of days later you go back to them and you say, how are you getting on with what we talked about? And they're like, and they tell you something, and they've gone off on a complete tangent, or they've done something completely different. And you're like, what? Have you not understood what we just discussed a few days ago? And the answer is no. No, they didn't. Some of you have been there. Why didn't they understand? Because all you did was tell them what to do, and you could have told them anything, and it could have been at that moment in time they were thinking about what they were going to have for dinner that night, or their brain was elsewhere, or they were looking at their emails, or whatever was going on. You didn't engage their brains. And the number one reason I have to ask a lot of questions with the people I'm coaching is it forces them to think and process the information they've just received. And it's been shown the brain works far, far more powerfully and effectively when you ask questions rather than just telling them what to do. So it may feel a bit weird the first few times you do it, to brief them and say, okay, well, just come. What do you think you're going to do next? Or what's your priority for this week? Or what are you going to give back to me on Thursday? You may be thinking, well, why would I ask them that? I've just told them. But it forces them to process the information. So asking them those questions, but also being when I say mentorship, being the support and encouragement for them as well. It's very important. A lot of people at that level do not have the confidence that maybe you have. And giving them constant recognition and praise is another great way of building performance, as well as engaging them. So we need that. We need the skills training, and you need that sort of questioning and answering process to really get the best out of people, because ultimately then you can move them up into that top right box where delegation becomes a joy, because you don't have to tell them what to do anymore. They tell you what they're going to do, and you sit there and go, wow, they know more than me. And that's a happy place. So I hope that's been useful, and thank you for your time, and look forward to taking some more of your questions in a moment. Thank you.